This was a vehicle that was unlike anything you had ever seen. A Lamborghini is more conservative than this.
I don't know if I agree, Jim.
You're wrong. I went to school for such things.
Yes, and I went to life, and I have an opinion. The other advantage of Ford transverse springing is generous body roll.
Well,
Jim's like girding his loins here. Oh man, it is way too early to be up on a Saturday, but there is a very special Cars and Coffee going on in Dearborn today at Ford World headquarters, no less. So we're gonna go and check that out, and we might just pick up a very special guest along the way, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But first, I gotta go get some gas. It's one of these houses somewhere along here. I think it is this one. Alrighty, we are here. Let's go see if he's ready. I told him 7:30. Not a moment later than that. He must still be in bed. He's usually not. Jim!
Yeah?
7:30, we gotta go to the Cars and Coffee. What are you doing?
Oh.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you lost, sir? Can I help you?
Yeah.
Poor Jim. He had a rough night. Well, that was quick.
Let's go.
You all set?
I'm ready, let's go.
You clean up pretty well.
More or less.
Okay.
All right.
We've got a V-type 8-cylinder motor car here
right.
to convey us hopefully reliably and safely to Dearborn. Is
Where's-
this going to be an episode of Jim Hall Knows It All or just the Craig's Classics?
Craig's knows that Craig's. I'm confused. It's still too early. Do you know what time it isn't?
Many. An infinite number of times that it isn't.
My awake time.
Okay.
But wherever we're going, I'll probably be able to wake up in the car. I suspect it's noisy and rattly.
Probably.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Anything this age is old and rattling.
Now, how do these pop out? Oh, they're already out.
Yes, it's a feature, convenience feature.
It is.
You'll learn very much about many of
How
the
many?
fine car
Like-
features of the Ford V8 for
Oh,
1936.
well, yes.
Dear
All right.
Lord.
Let's leg it.
Shall we?
Yep.
All right.
Now-
Jim, you live in a community with the most confusing intersections in the world, recently named by the Guinness Book of World Records.
It was designed that way to keep out riffraff in old cars,
Okay,
specifically cars built before 1938.
okay. Very specific group of people.
Yes.
But Jim, I want you to turn to the page, shows the vehicle in profile. I want to talk a little bit about Center-Poise Ride, which you are experiencing right now.
It's funny you should mention that because I was just thinking, I feel as though I am cradled between the springs.
And that is because you actually are. 1935.
My side doesn't ride as well.
No, well,
No.
you're seizing again, Jim.
Ah,
Please. No, so Center-Poise Ride, they moved the front spring ahead of the front axle. Prior to that, with the Model A, the Model T,
Right.
the early V8s, it was on top of the axle, so
Right.
the spring had to be fairly short.
And it was a transverse leaf spring.
Yeah, and we still have that
Yep.
here. But earlier, it was on top of the axle, had to be very short so it didn't foul out the braking mechanisms. And it had to be very stiff.
Right, because that affects the spring rate by
Correct.
definition, yeah.
And I've driven a Model A, I've driven a 34 Ford Roadster, and they are so stiff.
Oh, yeah, I've driven a V8.
Yeah.
And it was one of those cars, it was really interesting, but it reminded me why I don't want to live with a pre-war car for a long period of time.
Yep.
I don't have one right now. I haven't had one in a long time. And the one I did have that was in some ways the coolest one was also the most terrifying.
Uh-huh.
That's the one that had the cable brakes
Oh, geez.
with one single interconnected cable to all four wheels.
Now, how does that work?
How it works is terrifying
Poorly.
because once it's set up, it's good for probably, you can do secure stops where all four wheels are decelerating at a decent rate
Uh-huh.
until you've used the brakes about 6 times. And then
Okay.
all of a sudden you can hit them very gently and one will lock. But
Okay.
it might be the right front, and the next time you do it, it might be the left rear.
But remember, Jim, it's much safer to be thrown clear in a wreck.
You know what? There's one car that had a very specific and unique safety feature only implemented once in history.
Okay.
The car, of course, is the Tucker.
Ah.
It had the pop-out windshield for safety that would throw the windshield into a pedestrian just walking by. But it also had something they referred to as the crash basement.
The crash basement.
Correct, the crash basement, which it was reinforced footwell, and you would go down there in an accident.
So you're like, oh, I'm about to have a wreck.
And you would
I'm going to dive.
You would go into the crash basement.
No.
I'm like...
Because most crashes are planned.
Exactly. I don't know why they don't do this now. Wow. How many? Gee, we're 75% of engine revs to the red line.
That's why you need overdrive.
Yeah, no kidding.
But what's funny, you know the intake ports, you know the design of the exhaust ports on these engines.
Yep.
I don't think you could design one that's worse if you tried. Like if you actively tried to make an engine not flow well.
Yes, you could. Easy. You would do an F-head.
Okay.
Which is, if you're familiar with an F-head.
Like an exhaust valve up top.
It's weird because it's like the worst of an overhead valve and a flathead at the same time. So trust me, it is worse.
Okay. But anyway, like the port design on the flathead V8 is horrible. But this car has a surprising amount of pickup at higher speeds.
Yeah.
I'm getting on the throttle now. We're doing 60 miles an hour.
It feels like
65.
80. Wow.
Is that a Chesterfield, Jim, or is that a Davenport? What kind of couch is that?
I think that's a divan because it looks like it's French. It looks like Louis XIV.
Very Baroque.
Yeah.
In the back of a heavy-duty Chevrolet pickup truck.
Well, their furniture back then was made with real wood.
Now, this is true. No veneers.
None of this cheap plastic stuff.
How's Ben doing in the back?
Ben right now, our cameraman, is sitting in the rear seat crash basement.
In the crash basement, yes. We talked about this. There's his hand, see?
Hi, how are you, man?
Well, yeah, well, how do you like the Center-Poise Ride, Jim?
The Center-Poise Ride is, it's an incredible simulation of smoothness. There's no doubt about it, this car has a ride.
It does have a ride quality to it. Oh, that is terrible.
Oh, no.
Sebring coupe with a soft top and a very flat rear tire.
On a day like this, put the top down.
I don't think that's a convertible, though.
Well, it looked like it.
All right, we're going to take Michigan Avenue East.
And this says ramp 15 miles per hour. I suspect.
Now, the other advantage of Ford Transverse springing, aside from a buttery smooth ride, is generous body roll.
Well, this is safety roll, isn't it?
Safety roll, exactly.
If the car doesn't roll, you think you can go through even faster and faster.
And these bias ply tires, you don't want to push them, let's be honest.
Well,
Jim's like girding his loins here. All right, Jim, we have arrived at Ford headquarters. Now we have a few Model A's maybe of early V8, I can't tell.
Yeah, from this angle, it's tough.
So on the ride over, we talked a little bit about Center-Poise Ride, where Ford engineers took the front leaf spring and moved it ahead of the car's axle so they could make the spring longer and have a softer rate for a smoother ride. Now this right here is a 1929 Ford Model A, which still had the leaf spring mounted on top of the axle. So if Ben brings the camera in, you can see just the end of the leaf spring there, right underneath the fender, right on top of the axle. And you can see how much narrower that is than the entire width of the axle. That narrower spring has to be a lot stiffer to support the weight of the car. Therefore, Model A's and earlier Fords like this tend to ride a lot more harshly than my 36. So this is the Ford sort of concept garage. They've got a whole bunch of their older design studies on display here. A lot of great stuff.
And some production stuff too, but super low volume, like number 1 or number 2.
Exactly. So really nice display they put on here, a great diversity of vehicles, but I think we're gonna start off to the right here because
we need to look at the Model T.
Exactly, kind of where it all started. Now, of course, the Model T is not the first Ford ever built, not by a long stretch, but it's the one that I would argue matters the most because this is probably the most significant car ever built.
I don't know if I'd say that, but I would say this. If there was no Model T, there would be no Ford Motor Company.
Correct. And a nice touring car with the convertible top and not much else.
No, but you know,
You don't need anything else.
It has a wind screen, kind of.
Yeah.
So that helps.
Well, at 25 miles an hour, which is just about the end of the world, they might do like 35. But at that point, you're going to die because it's terrifying. I've driven one.
I have, and I wanted to get out of it as soon as I was done driving it. It's like, but this gave mobility to people. And the interesting thing is, it was a car that the workers could afford to buy.
This is exactly it.
Another thing with this car is people say, well, it's any color as long as you get black. Not initially. And they picked black because they realized the paint dried the fastest, because paint back then took days to dry. Mm-hmm. So what they had to do was to build a phenomenal number of bodies and basically just rack them and not touch them for 5-6 days.
Yeah. Which can have quite an effect on production when you're trying to crank up the volume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so colors simply meant some had to go 8 days, some had to get... So they said pick black.
Done.
Nobody complained.
And that was Henry Ford's approach, constantly lowering the price to
Correct.
sell more and more, which worked for quite a number of years until drivers started to get more sophisticated tastes, and GM really capitalized on that.
GM brought out a 6 for the price of a 4 by doing the Ford 90 Chevrolet, which was how much it cost in dollars, which, if I remember correctly, initially was $5 less than a Model T.
For a 6-cylinder engine?
A 6-cylinder engine and a real transmission.
Sliding gear transmission,
exactly.
Yep.
So it was a car that said, Ford, you got to update your thing. And of course, Henry, who didn't like changing stuff, didn't want to do it.
No.
And against his, I won't say better thoughts, but against his mind.
He finally relented and allowed Edsel to work on designing and producing the Model A. But they had to shut down the factory for
almost 2 years.
A very long time to retool, because they were focused solely on this.
Yep.
But this is where it started. There's a lot more to see. So what are some of the highlights, Jim? We've got an electric Ranger concept. This is the Ranger everybody loves because it's the small one, right?
The current one's small compared to the rest of the trucks. But,
But this is a concept for an EV variant, and I know they never went anywhere with it, and the range was probably like 12 miles.
I think they built limited numbers of electric Rangers at one time, and they were sold to like power companies and fleets.
Fleets.
Just like in Europe, they did an electric Tornado, which is the small transit.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think they've done that for fleets. They'll do low volume stuff.
But moving along, this right here, I'd say was a high watermark for Ford truck design. This is a 2004 F-150. This was a redesign that year. I think very handsome styling. I also remember the Car and Driver review of this. I think it was written by John Perley Huffman, if memory serves, but he described the truck as presidential. And I thought, that fits it just about perfectly.
But this is the truck that started the move to inaccessible beds.
Correct.
They dropped the DLO here. They raised the DLO in design. Normally, you would have done the bed lower sides.
Yep.
But they wanted it contiguous with the window line. And when they did, they raised this.
Because how weird would that be if it were down here?
Go look at the trucks before it. It doesn't look weird. It's the way they all looked. It's the way they all looked.
Okay.
This is the change. And suddenly you have beds that you can't load from the side.
Correct. Which necessitates the bed step, side steps, running boards, all of that.
These things,
but great for hauling wood chips, mulch, whatever, if you need volume. But for most people, that's probably not a good solution.
Who do you know simply loads wood chips or gravel?
Gravel.
Load that with gravel, and you know what you're probably going to do?
You're going to be going to the chiropractor the next day.
No, you're probably going to over GVW the truck.
Who cares? It's built Ford tough. Except the camshaft phasers on the 543 valve. But moving along, do we want to talk about GT or GT?
Well, you can't talk about GT without talking about GT or the GT they don't have here.
Let's talk about that then. Let's go this way, because we've got the GT and the GT, and then again, not the GT that they didn't bring because it's not here. But right here, this is amazing. This is the, what do you call this? The second generation GT? What would you call it? It's the production model that people could go out and buy.
It's the first generation production Ford GT.
Yeah. Which is a stunning car.
The first generation GT is actually 3 cars.
Okay.
Ford GT, J car, Ford GT Mark IV.
Okay.
No one remembers the J car. The J car evolved into the Mark IV. The J car was a really interesting car. Aerodynamically, it had troubles, and it killed a driver 10 miles at Riverside testing as it went into the air. So the J car basically was a dead end. And they evolved the Ford GT Mark IV out of it. The original GT was basically a small block, a 289 only.
Ooh, nobody wants that.
Well, it fit the European regulations because I believe they had a displacement cap.
Gotcha.
And then they put 427s in them. That was called a Mark II, and it grew big air scoops out here because they needed a lot more air for the 427.
That's a big engine. But here, On the production model, we've got a supercharged 5.4 liter 32 valve quad cam modular V8.
A nice
tons
engine.
of power, 6-speed manual gearbox. Wonderful combination.
Yep.
I know you're going to disagree with me, Jim. My favorite livery, of course, is the Gulf oil color, the light blue and the orange. I think that is super sharp.
Golf racing color.
Golf racing.
Now,
But you do not agree.
no, but they were too literal in the car by doing, and you have
Oh,
to do
yes.
this. But one of the problems is if you have one of these and you park in a garage, if you can't get the door open very far,
You
trust
have
me,
to
you can't get out of the car.
you have to burrow out.
You can't get out.
But Jim is talking about this scallop in the roof here where the door closes over top
Because
of
when
the
you
passenger
open the
seat
door,
and the
you've
driver's
got to
seat.
get it open far enough to get
Yeah.
out here, and you can't step out of the car vertically because of that. Conversely, it'd be hard to get into if they didn't do it. I understand it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is they didn't do it on the new Ford GT.
Yes.
Why?
Well, they've got a lot more design going on here, right?
Nope, but why didn't they do the door cuts?
I don't know.
Scissors doors.
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
Forgot about that.
Yep.
Yeah, because they open up
And
upward.
forward.
Yep.
But yeah, it's scissors doors.
Yeah. But my favorite livery is right here. I would also, the Ford GT is probably the only vehicle I would ever want in white. I just don't like white vehicles. They look to me very municipal, but I would take a GT in a heartbeat with the blue stripes. I think that's a beautiful combination.
My favorite GT is without stripes or one they didn't offer, and that would be painted like the original Ford GT40s,
Okay.
which were effectively white cars with dark metallic blue hoods and dark metallic blue stripes going over the top.
Okay.
And that's how I would want my Ford GT
Little subtle.
2005. Well, like it's the original car.
Sure. Second gen production model, another beautiful car.
Yeah.
A lot going on with the design. I love some of the aero work that's in the body. Obviously the heat extractors in the hood.
Well,
Very
those are
stylized.
also on that car too. You do
Well,
that.
sure.
Yeah, you do that when you have a mid-engine car usually.
Yes. But look at the dash to axle. Surely it's front drive, Jim.
Well,
It's so
is
short,
this obviously
right?
too.
But the drama to the bodywork on the GT, the way that they've cut the doors out, the way the air flows through here, I think is just very cool.
It's striking, no
It's
doubt
a
about
striking
it.
design, attractive car, beautiful car from all angles.
This is another one that does look good in white. It actually does. It carries white off because there's so much going on. There's so much surface.
Yep. But not ridiculous and over the top.
Yes, it is ridiculous over the top. It is.
It's not a
It is.
Lamborghini.
A Lamborghini is more conservative than this. A Huracan is a lot more conservative than this.
I don't know if I agree, Jim.
You're wrong. I went to school for such things.
Yes, and I went to life, and I have an opinion. Shall we move down a little farther? There was a high-performance Ford that you considered purchasing, but you didn't because of the doors. Fiesta ST.
Drove one, loved it. It's a hoot to drive.
Yep.
It actually is.
Fun little car.
The only thing is, in the rest of the world got a 3-door, which was considered to be sales-proof in the United States, so they didn't import it. The 3-door has the B-pillar moved back. So I can actually fit in the car where the seat needs to be for the pedals and the steering wheel without being pushed into the middle of the car.
Sure.
Because
that B post you're saying is right.
It's right
where
at my
your
shoulder.
So you're looking over and you're
I
just
wasn't
looking.
even looking. It was
just
crowding
in the
me
way.
because my shoulders were wide in seats. And the thing is, other than that, this is what lasts to drive. Now it does have the wet belt.
Wet timing belt, which
Yeah.
is a decision I will never understand.
I don't know. Hopefully it saved them money.
Not on warranty costs,
No,
I'm sure.
No, but this warranty rarely comes into play when you're doing new stuff like EcoBoost.
But pre-EcoBoost, we have two other high-performance Fords. I love them both. I know you may not like one of them, but SVT Focus, I had a 2002 ZX3 myself. It was not an SVT, but I had the manual transmission. I did some minor things to hop it up. It was a very fun car. Very reliable, lasted a very long time. I put almost 200,000 miles on it. Relatively few issues.
Did they not add a 4-door SVT towards the end of the
Yes,
run?
they did.
Yeah.
They had a 4-door. I wish they had the wagon, though.
Oh, that
would have been
was
so
the one.
cool.
The wagon would have been the best, but they didn't do it, I know.
But very handsome styling. I think you had 170 horsepower.
Yep.
Yeah, from the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine.
Yeah, it was a great package.
Very good 6-speed Getrag manual, which gearing was a little bit tall for the torque output of 145 pound-feet.
That's called emissions.
I'm sure. But overall, a very fun car and very practical.
Yeah.
You could fit a ton of stuff in the hatch there. Loved that car. SVT Contour a couple years before the Focus.
Didn't they do a Mercury
They had the
version of this?
Mystique, not the
sorry.
SVT, though.
No, I thought it was the Detour and the Mistake.
This is correct,
Yeah.
because these cars were a
And the
financial
European
blunder.
version- the European version, I think, was called the Mondano.
You've got all the names down, Jim.
Yeah, I know them all.
Yes.
This is a car, it always had me scratching my head. If I remember correctly, it was 200 horsepower out of a 2.5 liter engine. So
Correct. V6 Duratec.
Correct. At that time, they had a 200 horsepower, 3-liter Duratec V6.
Same engine, just a little bit bigger lung
built in the
capacity.
Taurus. And I never understood, just put it in here. They would have gotten a torque boost.
Yep.
They would have had the same power.
Yep.
But they would have had to do a full re-emission certification on it.
So that's the money on a very low production car.
But there we go. They're saving money.
Exactly. For all the wrong reasons, perhaps. But still a very quick car. It sounded good, much like the original Taurus Show, or SHO if you prefer. I don't know what the appropriate nomenclature is for that. Does it matter?
The Show had an engine.
It did. It was a car with an engine. But the point I'm trying to make, Jim, we can't see it here, but we can get a picture from Ford. Dual intake runners, which was the same idea that they had with the Taurus Show. So long, narrow runners for lower speed torque production. Secondaries that open up at a certain RPM range for a lot more top-end power.
My 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado has dual intake.
From your Quadrajet carburetor?
No, on the air cleaner.
Okay.
But they're big and impressive.
Oh, yes.
You know, you're like, wow. Okay.
Wow.
Look, it's like a giant round tooth-pronged fork.
Yeah, just shoots out.
And it makes lots of power and torque.
And heat and noise. No, that's a flathead, sorry. They just make heat and vibration in that order, and power somewhere down the list. So that's a look at some of the relatively recent Ford performance vehicles, but there's some concepts you wanted to talk about really quick as well,
yes.
John, because this is, the concept garage. And as we walk that way, I'm going to...
I'm concerned about merch. Do we have any merch?
I'm going to partially undress.
Well, that's repulsive.
And show you that. What do you think of that, huh? The world is flat. Jim has a look about him right now. He looks out of sorts, but you can buy this from our AutoEsoterica merchandise store. Ben designed this. Clever pun. It's not just the boxer engines that are flat, folks. Flat had the original flat.
There's something else with flat, too. And on the other side, too, unfortunately.
Yeah, they ran out of budget for air, or maybe nitrogen for the type.
Saving money.
This is true. But concepts, Jim, you wanted to talk about a couple of them.
Yeah, this is something that when I first saw it at the Detroit Auto Show, it was very impressive, simply because it was an idea that a lot of people have had, and they did it again. And the idea was a car that's the length of a C-Class car, a Focus, a Cruze or whatever, but it was a Lincoln.
Yeah.
And they decided it needed to seat 6 people.
Like a traditional Lincoln.
Like a traditional luxury car.
Yes.
And as a result, while it's the length of a C car, it's the width of a D or an E car.
So it's quite a square layout in plan view.
It's getting square. But it was a brave car. It was interesting. It works for the United States because our roads are wide enough. We can easily manage a normal car width.
Yep.
Conversely, because we can manage large cars here, there was no reason to do it in the U.S.
Yep.
Except maybe in Manhattan.
Unless you needed a compact hearse, because we're just missing the Landau bar on the back on each side here.
Be nice. It's nicer than that.
And I know, I'm being facetious, but it is a nice design. And I especially like the little detailing, just the Lincoln emblem that they put on the pillars here. I think that's very attractive.
It's a car where it obviously wasn't for production, but they're looking at a car to say, where can luxury go?
Yep.
And understand the context for this. If I remember correctly, this was in the time of the Mini Cooper. The first generation of the new Mini Cooper,
yeah.
Which, if you remember, was a B car in size for the price of a D car.
Okay, so they're being ambitious like that.
Well, all car companies looked at this, and I know that both GM and Ford did, and they looked at it and said, what's going on here? How can they make this work, and can we do it?
They could have if they did it right.
They could have. The question is, because of the perception of small cars in the United States, would it have damaged the Lincoln brand? And
could it be damaged more than it was at the time?
Yes.
I don't know that that's possible.
Yes, you can always do more damage, believe me.
All right.
It's always possible to do more damage.
Okay.
When you think you can't is when you're going to do it.
Do the most damage.
Yes, exactly.
One other thing before we move on to 3 other very interesting concepts. I want you to get a shot of the interior, Ben. I think it's stunning. And the way the dashboard has sort of, I don't know if vestigial is the right term, but that dual cowl design that you got on the early, like the Continentals of the early 60s.
This interior is interesting because it used a traditional material, wood, in a way nobody had done at that time.
Yes. Yep.
Nobody had played around with it, using it as a big horizontal, because that surface is almost more horizontal than vertical.
It is.
And it accentuates the grain, so you would do it open pore wood. You wouldn't want to do it, you could do it like furniture, but to me, this interior is one of those interiors, everything they did makes it look wider inside, which is very important.
For 6 passengers, right?
And if you're going to try to play up the width, you want people to look at it and go, this is wide.
Maybe if Ford does an autonomous brand like Waze or Waymo or whatever, Cruise, they could build this for the 6-passenger seating. Moving along, though. We got 3 other, Jim's not having it. Moving along though. What do we have here? The 427, the Interceptor, and the 49 concept.
Correct.
Similar
takes on
car.
alternative full-size Fords.
Correct.
Specifically, not Lincolns.
No Lincolns here.
Not Mercurys.
Definitely not.
But you notice there's nothing in here that was Mercury. Not even the Mercury Messenger is in here.
It's like that brand never existed.
And we know it did.
Too bad.
But
427.
427 is this is a car that when it was on the stand and you looked at it at the Detroit show, you wondered, well, it's a production car, surely.
Yeah. Because there's nothing outlandish or exotic about the design, right?
You looked at it and you probably would want more bumper offset if you were going to try to certify it in the front and the rear.
Yeah.
But other than that, this is in a lot of ways a very well tailored big car.
Yeah.
I would suggest that this is the Chrysler 300 done well.
Not a fan of the 300.
Oh, no, I do like the 300.
But even better.
But this is that done really well, where they nail everything.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that always got me about the 300, it did not have an especially long dash to axle.
Interesting.
You
I've never noticed that. Yeah.
The thing is that you don't notice it because it just looks like it's a nice looking car.
Yeah.
But this to me is sort of that on steroids.
Yeah.
If you take this and put it on steroids, you get the Interceptor.
You get the Interceptor, which you prefer much to the 427.
I prefer it simply because it has some form to it.
Yeah. Along the side in particular. If you look at the 427, it's just very slab-sided, not a lot going on.
Not just slab-sided. The thing is, this is very much a traditional look for a car at that time. It's very conventional. It's good. It's well done. The surfacing is really nice. But on this car, you've got some form where the body pulls out farther for the front wheels. They tuck it in quickly. The other thing is, the form for the rear fender is much more well developed.
And there's a shoulder to it as well that curves.
Correct.
Where the door handles are placed. This little area here.
This is a car where, and even the detailing on it, I think is good. They decided to not try to do what I call a one-piece upper. They broke the upper all the way around with the bright work they used for the windows.
Gotcha.
So it literally is a floating upper, but instead of floating on black, it's floating on chrome.
Uh-huh.
I think this is a really, really, really nicely designed car with a spectacular dash to axle.
A huge measurement there.
Yeah.
And guess what? Interceptor does not start with an F, which Ford would have required at the time, right?
Oh, well, remember, they were going to have...
Interceptor, maybe.
Well, they realized this, they were going to have the Frown Victoria. They were going to do, the one that got me, that really disturbed me the most was the Mustang.
That wouldn't have sold.
And all trucks were going to have E's. Remember, there was Econoline, Expedition, Excursion, and then F-150, but it was EFF-150. So the plan was trucks, E, cars F.
There you go.
Fusion, Focus,
Fiesta,
you're right.
Taurus,
Thunderbird,
exactly.
So they were ready.
But Interceptor.
Well, 500, remember the
that
Taurus.
Too, of course, the predecessor to the Taurus when it was reintroduced.
Yes.
But nice chamfering to the back, adds a bit of interest.
And then there's
very
other
handsome
stuff
car.
they did. They just this little dive in here. It's small, it's subtle. It amplifies this whole form, which is for the lamp form. But it just looks the car looks. It's very well surfaced. But you also want to talk about bumper offsets. You'd have to do some work there.
It's a bit flat.
Yeah, or you do the 5-mile-an-hour pole test, and you have to also replace the deck lid in the rear window.
No thanks. Less of a success here, I think, the 49.
The 49 was trying to do something different, I think.
This is more show car than any production intent.
Much show car, and it was done at sort of the peak of retro.
Yeah.
So they milked it. I mean,
yes, they did.
They did, and down to the interior, the exterior.
Yeah. Just like a 49 or 50 Ford, you've got that single instrument cluster. There's a clock on the center of the dashboard as well. Very strong cues from the shoebox Fords.
Yep.
Also the front, of course. Ford is spelled out across the leading edge of the hood there, just like the 49 Ford.
It was striking, but there's also the stuff to me that hurt it. It's overbodied.
Oh, yeah.
It's overbodied.
Just like a shoebox Ford, Jim.
Exactly. And it was going to be overbodied in the rear because you're doing a tight rear fender house, so you can't have it. I mean, but the point is, these are all these things that, to me, make it less striking.
Yeah.
It's striking in a retro way, but when you see the Interceptor to me is a high watermark for a four-door sedan, American four-door sedan. It really is.
Yeah. This is more of a novelty.
It's a novelty, and the thing is, it also reiterated the environment of retro cars, so that Ford was going to follow up with the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
So...
powered by Thunderbird. You see a Thunderbird badge right there in the fender.
Well, there was a time they said Fords had Thunderbird engines if you paid more money.
Uh-huh. Yes. But a little bit of a swing and a miss, perhaps. But Interceptor, definitely, I would agree, Jim, my favorite of that trio of vehicles. We did have, let's say, two people movers you wanted to talk about. One I love, one I'm just confused by.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with the Fairlane concept here, what does that look like to you folks? What does this concept remind you of? I'll give you another second to guess.
It's much more obvious as you move around the side.
Yeah. And of course, you guys already know, this is the concept version of the Ford Flex.
Yep.
Which is a controversial vehicle that's very sort of avant-garde styling, but I think it's very cool.
I love the Flex because one of the things about the Flex was it didn't look like it came from a domestic manufacturer or European manufacturer. It was an outlier in the true sense of the word, but it was functional.
Yes.
It was comfortable. It cut a swath. And the interesting thing in Southern California, where Ford, basically other than trucks, they weren't very good, Flexes sold really well.
They were very popular on the coasts, I remember.
Exactly. I saw one in Newport Beach that somebody there owned. I tracked down who it was.
Okay.
It was a Flex, but they had inserts in the body ridges of tortoiseshell.
Tortoiseshell.
On a black Flex.
That would be quite interesting.
It looked really good. You were looking at it, it's like,
because they were a bit larger on the production model than
they
here.
Seemed
just
to
a little
be,
bit larger.
But part of it was remember, the production model had a higher belt.
I was just going to say, this has a lot more greenhouse than the production Flex did.
Right.
And a lot more glass.
I think when they brought it up, they respaced them, and that made them look like they were larger. I'm not sure if they were.
Yeah.
The things on it that the market said they didn't want, it had sliding doors like a minivan.
And which I don't know why people hate that.
Because they equated it with a minivan.
Yeah.
And minivans were the ultimate mom mobiles.
Exactly.
So they went for production. They were glad to hear that because the truth is conventional doors are lower cost and better, easier to execute without having to hide tracks and stuff. Yep. So they went to a conventional door on it, which was the smart thing to do.
And honestly, Ford has the new, the rear drive CD6 architecture that they build the Aviator and the Explorer on.
Right.
That is crying for them to bring back a next generation Flex.
I absolutely agree.
The structure is there, the drivetrains are there. Just take an Explorer, redo the front end to look something like this, lower it like a wagon.
What you'd have to do, you'd basically do what they call a top hat. Everything from the rockers up is new. If you were clever, you would want to make it work with the front of dash, the firewall. Yeah. There's a lot of money there.
A lot of money.
But you're talking about basically a new upper on the car, top hat, and they could do something that would be as striking. The problem is, has the market moved on from the Flex?
I think what's old is new again. And also, if a vehicle is genuinely attractive and is functional and meets people's needs, they'll buy it. They will buy it.
I agree, but there's something about it. Would it be considered, is it not old enough to be what's new is old again? In other words, remember, you can still buy these used.
Sure.
Okay, and now that means you're buying a used car. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Then there's the coolest car
here. But then this is the Ford Bolus concept, I believe it was.
It is not the Bolus. When this is at the Detroit Auto Show, I was bowled over for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which is it's polished aluminum and it used to be much shinier. It wasn't chrome, but it was more polished than it appears to be now. This was a vehicle that was unlike anything you had ever seen.
As you might imagine, it was the Airstream concept.
And Airstream was involved with it.
So hence the silver bodywork.
Yep. The car has a completely asymmetric upper.
Oh, yeah. One giant door on this side.
The DLO on this side is radically different, daylight opening from the DLO on the other side. Accenting it with basically day-glow orange is brilliant on the car because it throws not just some color, it throws a lot of color onto a car that is gray, but remember, it's also going to reflect the environment it's in. The colors of the environment.
Yes.
Ford took pictures of this, PR photos of this at dusk.
Okay. The golden hour?
They're striking. No, after the golden hour.
A little bit after the golden hour. Okay.
Yeah, so they got lots of blue and red at the core. The pictures are great. I loved this vehicle. It was a gutsy product to do. It has the weirdest interior I think I've ever seen in a Ford.
With safety shield seats here.
Yes.
Contoured shoulder protection.
I believe did swivel.
Yeah.
But what's weird is it had a digital fireplace.
That round thing that looks like some sort of reactor.
Yes, and you see the vents on it where hot air came out.
So everybody can sit around the fire and roast their marshmallows, make their s'mores.
No, you couldn't roast your marshmallows. You just sort of mash into the glass, which wasn't hot enough to do anything.
That's true.
You'd probably get a bunch of chocolate and junk on the fire. And
you don't want that in your concept vehicle.
But I mean, this thing was striking. I mean,
was the styling inspired by a suppository? And Jim is offended now.
It was a sketch. Somebody drew a form. And then it's like, can we make that a car? The way it opened is interesting. This is a lift-up hatch with then two basic...
that's cool.
Yeah, it is.
That's very cool.
It opened very wide.
Yeah.
Because as you can see, these are hinged past the rollover. So these would pull way, way out relative to... this was one of those products. Functionally, other than the fireplace, it was really interesting, and I wish to God they had the guts to do it. But
Ford is traditionally a very conservative automaker. Would you agree?
Traditionally, yes.
I mean, they wouldn't have the guts, like you were mentioning, to build something like this.
They can do it as a concept.
Yes.
They can maybe use some of it to influence other cars, like the graphics and so on. But that's about as far as it's going to go.
Yes, but Jim, in closing then, what's your favorite vehicle on display here? If you had to pick just one.
The Ford GT that I don't think we talked about, the Ford GT second generation that has the blue hood, the blue stripes, and the white car.
I think it was behind the F-150, the
correct.
2004.
It's the genuine heritage livery from the initial Ford GT40 from 1964.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's the one.
Sharp car, cool paint scheme, basically.
Yeah.
Very cool. I would go, just for nostalgia reasons, with the SVT Focus, just because it was always a fun little car.
Over the Gulf Ford GT?
I'm a man of the people, Jim. I'm going with the SVT Focus.
I'm a man
wild
of the people,
card
too.
pick.
I want the people to look at my car.
This is very true. I'm so glad Ford held on to all of those concept vehicles so we could get a chance to check them out once again. It's a super cool idea. The automaker is actually building another vehicle that looks like it could be a concept, but it's not. It's called the Strop Bronco. And Jason White and I recently checked that out, giving you a deep dive into this product. So click right over here to check that feature out next.